Welcome to Darkwake Signal. The story you are about to hear reveals a Navy aircraft found exactly as it was left, where it was never supposed to be. If you like this story, subscribe, hit that like button, and let us know where you're watching from. Signal received. Let's begin. The flight was logged as a routine training exercise. Aircraft type, E-6B Prowler. Call sign, Osprey 27. Crew complement, 4. Departure time, 0940 hours. Expected return, 1,210 hours. It never returned. The official incident report, filed 3 days after the aircraft disappeared, listed the cause as probable controlled flight into terrain during adverse weather conditions. The search area covered 340 square nautical miles. No debris was recovered. No emergency beacon was detected. After 2 weeks, the operation was downgraded to recovery status. After 6 weeks, it was suspended entirely. The families were notified. The crew was declared deceased. The file was sealed. That should have been the end of it. My name is Lieutenant Alistair Boone. I have been a Navy dive officer for 9 years. I specialize in underwater recovery operations, wreck documentation, and salvage assessment. I follow protocol. I trust procedure. I do not speculate beyond available evidence. But I know when something does not fit the pattern. The assignment came through standard channels. Survey operation, designated priority moderate, coordinates provided, timeline flexible. The briefing was short. A routine sonar sweep conducted by the oceanographic research vessel USNS Pathfinder had detected an anomaly on the continental shelf, 73 meters down. Shape consistent with aircraft wreckage. No identification possible from surface imaging. Commander Silas Whitmore delivered the briefing himself, which was unusual. Whitmore was attached to naval intelligence, not operations. He rarely involved himself in standard recovery work. He stood at the front of the briefing room, hands clasped behind his back, expression neutral. The object was discovered 4 days ago during a geological survey, he said. Preliminary analysis suggests it may be a downed aircraft, but we have no record of any losses in this area within the last 20 years. What about before 20 years? I asked. Whitmore paused. There are older incidents on file. We are reviewing them. How much older? That information is still being compiled, which meant classified or inconvenient. Your objective is straightforward, Whitmore continued. Confirm the object's identity. Document structural condition. Recover any identifying markers or serial numbers. If the wreckage is determined to be military, we will assess salvage feasibility. If it is civilian, we will notify the appropriate authorities. What if it is neither? Someone asked from the back. Whitmore's expression did not change. Then you document that as well. The dive team was assembled within 6 hours. Myself, Chief Diver Rowan Ashcroft, and 2 support divers, Petty Officer Marcus Hale and Seaman Daniels. Hale was experienced, methodical, good with cameras. Daniels was newer but competent. Ashcroft had been diving longer than I had been alive. We departed aboard the MSV Thresher at 0600 the following morning. The weather was stable. Seas were calm. Visibility was forecast at 5 meters at depth. Ashcroft ran equipment checks while I reviewed the sonar images Whitmore had provided. The object was large, roughly 15 meters in length, resting on a shallow slope. The wings were visible, angled upward slightly, consistent with a controlled descent rather than a high-speed impact. Doesn't look like a crash, Ashcroft said, leaning over my shoulder. No, I agreed. Looks like someone put it down gently. I did not respond. Ashcroft was right, but that raised questions I was not ready to ask yet. We reached the coordinates at 0830. The captain, a veteran named Garvin, positioned the ship directly over the site and activated dynamic positioning to hold us steady against the current. Sonar shows the object at 73 meters, Garvin said. Slope angle is 12 degrees. Seabed composition is soft sediment over bedrock. You should have stable footing. Current? I asked. Negligible. Less than half a knot. Water temperature? 8 degrees Celsius at depth. Cold but manageable. Ashcroft and I suited up while Hale prepared the camera rig. Daniels ran final checks on the descent line and backup tether. Everything was routine. Everything was normal. Except it was not. Whitmore had come aboard the Thresher personally, which was not standard for a survey operation. He stood on the bridge now, watching through the window, hands still clasped behind his back. I caught his eye. He nodded once. We entered the water at 0912. The descent was smooth. The water was clear near the surface, gradually darkening as we dropped. At 20 meters, the light began to fail. At 40, we switched on our primary lamps. Ashcroft was beside me, his movements calm and deliberate. He had done this thousands of times. So had I. But there was something about the way the darkness closed in around us that felt different. At 60 meters, the wreck appeared below. It was an aircraft. No question. The shape was unmistakable. Fuselage, wings, tail section. But the condition was wrong. There was no impact damage. No crushed nose cone. No sheared wings. The aircraft was intact, resting on the seabed as if it had been carefully placed there. Surface control, this is Boone. We have visual confirmation. Object is a fixed-wing aircraft, appears to be military. Structural condition is anomalously intact for a crash site. Garvin's voice crackled through the calm copy. Boone. Can you identify the type? I descended closer, my light sweeping across the fuselage. The hull was covered in marine growth, barnacles, algae, thin layers of sediment, but beneath it I could see the outline of access panels, antennae mounts, and hardpoints for external stores. A 6B Prowler, I said. Electronic warfare variant. Silence on the comm. Then Whitmore's voice, quiet and controlled. Confirm that identification, Lieutenant. Confirmed. 6B. I can see the wing-mounted jamming pods and the tail configuration. This is definitely a Prowler. Another pause. Proceed with documentation, Whitmore said. Ashcroft moved to the starboard side, his camera already recording. I approached the cockpit. The canopy was closed. Through the algae-streaked transparency, I could see the interior. Instruments, control panels, seats. Empty seats. No crew visible, I reported. Check the serial numbers, Whitmore said. I moved along the fuselage toward the tail section. Aircraft serial numbers are typically stenciled near the vertical stabilizer. I found the location, scraped away a layer of growth with my glove, and aimed my light at the exposed metal. The numbers were there. Faint but legible. I read them aloud. Bureau number 161880. Silence. Surface control, did you copy? We copied, Whitmore said. His voice had changed. Tighter. Hold position. Do not proceed further until I give authorization. I looked at Ashcroft. He had stopped filming and was staring at me. Lieutenant, he said quietly. Hold position, I repeated. We waited. Seconds stretched into a minute, then two. Finally, Whitmore's voice returned. Lieutenant Boone, I need you to confirm the bureau number one more time. 161880, I said slowly. And you are certain the aircraft is an ES-6B? Positive. Another long pause. Lieutenant, Whitmore said carefully, Bureau number 161880 corresponds to an EA-6B Prowler that was lost during a training exercise 9 months ago. The aircraft disappeared over open ocean approximately 200 nautical miles from your current position. I felt cold despite the insulated suit. Then how did it get here? I asked. That, Whitmore said, is what you are going to find out. Ashcroft moved closer to me. What's going on? The aircraft wasn't supposed to be here, I said. It went down somewhere else. Currents could have moved it. Not 200 miles. Not intact. Ashcroft looked at the prowler, then back at me. So what are we saying? Someone moved it? I did not answer because I did not have an answer. Lieutenant Boone, Whitmore's voice came through again. I am authorizing full interior inspection. I need you to access the cockpit and document everything you find. Pay particular attention to the flight controls, navigational systems, and any personal effects. Understood. The canopy release was external, located on the port side of the fuselage. I found the mechanism, corroded but still functional, and applied pressure. The latch gave with a dull click. The canopy did not move. I tried again. Same result. Canopy is stuck, I reported. Mechanism released, but the frame isn't budging. Can you force it? I wedged my pry bar into the gap and levered upward. Ashcroft joined me, adding his weight. The canopy groaned, shifted slightly, then suddenly swung open with a rush of trapped air. Bubbles erupted from the cockpit, rising in a chaotic stream toward the surface. The release was violent enough that I had to brace myself against the fuselage to avoid being pushed back. When the bubbles cleared, I looked inside. The cockpit was dry. Not flooded. Not filled with water. Dry. I stared. That was impossible. The aircraft had been submerged for 9 months. Even if the canopy had been sealed, pressure differentials would have forced water inside. There was no way the interior could have remained dry. But it had. Surface control, I said slowly. The cockpit interior is not flooded. Say again? The cockpit is dry. There is an air pocket. Silence. Then Whitmore, that is not possible. I am looking at it right now. Ashcroft moved beside me and aimed his light inside. The beam illuminated the instrument panel, the control stick, the seats. Everything was dry. Dust motes floated in the light. This doesn't make sense, Ashcroft said. I reached inside and touched the control panel. My glove came back clean. No moisture. No condensation. Document everything, Whitmore ordered. Hale's camera rig was lowered from the surface, and I maneuvered it into position to record the interior. The instruments were intact. The controls were in neutral positions. The throttles were pulled back to idle. And on the pilot's seat, folded neatly, was a flight suit. Not discarded. Not torn. Folded. There is a flight suit on the pilot's seat, I reported. It appears to have been deliberately placed there. Any identification? I leaned in closer, careful not to disturb anything, and checked the name tape stitched above the breast pocket. Name tape reads Merrick, I said. Whitmore did not respond immediately. When he did, his voice was very quiet. Lieutenant Commander Joseph Merrick was the pilot of Osprey 27. He was declared deceased 9 months ago. I stared at the empty flight suit. Where is he? I asked. That, Whitmore said, is the question. I moved through the cockpit systematically, documenting every detail. The co-pilot's seat was empty. The electronic warfare officer stationed behind the cockpit showed no signs of disturbance. All systems were powered down, but the switch position suggested a controlled shutdown rather than an emergency. Ashcroft examined the rear compartment where the other 2 crew members would have been stationed. Same story back here, he said. Everything is secure. No emergency equipment deployed. It's like they just stepped out. Check for the logbook, I said. Every military aircraft carries a logbook, a physical record of flight hours, maintenance, and crew notes. It is typically stowed in a compartment near the pilot's station. Ashcroft found it. The logbook was dry, the pages intact. He handed it to me carefully. I opened it to the last entry. The handwriting was neat, deliberate. The date was 9 months ago. The entry was signed by Lieutenant Commander Merrick. It read, Final approach. Descending to holding depth. All systems nominal. Crew disembarking as planned. Procedure complete. I read it twice. Surface control, I said. The logbook contains a final entry. It references a holding depth and states that the crew disembarked as planned. That does not match any known procedure, Whitmore said. No, I agreed. It does not. What else? I flipped back through earlier entries. Standard flight hours, routine maintenance notes, nothing unusual until the final week. Then the tone changed. The entries became shorter, more cryptic. One entry, dated 5 days before the disappearance, read, "Received updated coordinates. New objective confirmed. Crew briefed." Another, 2 days later, "Systems modified per directive. Awaiting final authorization." The last entry before the final one simply said, "Authorization received. Proceeding." "Lieutenant Boone," Whitmore said, "I need you to bring that logbook to the surface immediately." Understood. But there is something else. What? I aimed my light at the instrument panel. One gauge in particular caught my attention, the depth indicator. It was calibrated for altitude, as all aircraft instruments are, measuring height above sea level. But someone had modified it. The dial face had been replaced with a custom scale, marked not in feet of altitude but in meters of depth. And the needle was pointing to 73 meters. "The depth gauge has been recalibrated," I said. "It is reading current depth, not altitude." "Explain." "Someone modified this aircraft to measure depth instead of altitude. They turned it into a submersible." Ashcroft was staring at me. "That's insane. Look at the gauge." He looked. He saw what I saw. "This aircraft was designed to descend," I continued. "Not crash. Descend. They controlled it all the way down." "Why?" Ashcroft asked. I looked at the empty seats, the folded flight suit, the logbook entry referencing disembarkation. "Because they were delivering something," I said. "Or someone." We surfaced at 1,047 hours. The decompression stops were routine, but the ascent felt longer than it should have. I kept thinking about the dry cockpit, the folded flight suit, the modified depth gauge. When we broke the surface, the recovery team was already waiting. They pulled us onto the dive platform and began stripping our equipment with mechanical efficiency. Whitmore was there, standing apart from the others, his expression unreadable. "The logbook," he said. I handed it to him, still sealed in the waterproof evidence bag. He took it without a word and walked toward the bridge. Ashcroft sat on the deck beside me, pulling off his hood. His hair was gray at the temples, his face lined from decades of sun and salt water. He had seen things that would have broken younger men, but now he looked uncertain. "In 32 years, he said quietly, "I have never seen anything like that." "Neither have I. Aircraft don't descend like that. Not without power. Not controllably. This one did." He looked at me. "You think they modified the whole aircraft? Made it watertight? The cockpit was dry. That means they sealed it, reinforced it, turned it into a pressure hull. That would take months. Specialized equipment. Why would anyone do that?" I did not answer because I was asking myself the same question. Captain Garvin appeared on deck. "Lieutenant Boone, Commander Whitmore wants you on the bridge. Now." I followed him up 2 levels to the bridge. Whitmore was standing over a chart table, the logbook open in front of him. 2 other officers I did not recognize flanked him. They wore intelligence insignia. "Close the hatch," Whitmore said. Garvin complied. The bridge became a sealed room. Whitmore looked up at me. "What you found down there stays on this ship. No reports. No casual conversation. Nothing leaves this vessel without my authorization. Is that clear?" "Yes, sir." He gestured to the logbook. "This document references procedures that do not exist in any naval aviation manual. It mentions coordinates, directives, and authorizations that have no official record. Either Lieutenant Commander Merrick was operating under classified orders, or he was acting independently. Which do you think it was? I asked. Whitmore's jaw tightened slightly. I think someone gave him those orders. I think someone authorized that modification. And I think whoever did it made certain there would be no paper trail. One of the intelligence officers, a thin man with cold eyes named Vickers, spoke up. The question is whether this was sanctioned or rogue. There is a third option, I said. They looked at me. It was sanctioned but then disavowed when something went wrong. Whitmore did not confirm or deny. He simply closed the logbook. You are returning to the wreck. I need a full structural survey. I need to know if there are any other modifications. I need to understand how that aircraft was able to descend in a controlled manner and maintain an air pocket for 9 months. That is not possible, I said. Not without active life support systems. And yet it happened. Sir, with respect, if that cockpit has been sealed for 9 months, the air inside should be toxic. Carbon dioxide buildup alone would make it unbreathable. But when we opened the canopy, the air that escaped was fresh. Whitmore exchanged a look with Vickers. Defined fresh, Vickers said. No discoloration in the bubble stream. No chemical odor. It looked and behaved like normal atmosphere. You are suggesting the air was being replenished. I am suggesting something was keeping it viable. Silence settled over the bridge. Lieutenant Boone, Whitmore said carefully, I need you to go back down there and find out what that something is. The second dive commenced at 1,320 hours. This time the objective was different. Not documentation. Investigation. Ashcroft and I descended together, accompanied by Hale, who carried additional lighting and sensor equipment. Daniels remained on the surface as safety diver. The wreck looked the same as before. Intact. Undisturbed. Wrong. We approached the open canopy. I aimed my light inside, half expecting something to have changed. But the interior was exactly as we had left it. Dry. Dust motes still floating in the stagnant air. We are going inside, I said. Ashcroft hesitated. That is not standard procedure. Nothing about this is standard. I positioned myself at the canopy opening and carefully maneuvered my upper body into the cockpit. The space was tight. My equipment scraped against the frame. But I managed to get my head and shoulders inside. The air felt different. Not breathable, I was still on my rebreather, but present. Real. As if the cockpit existed in a different environment than the surrounding ocean. I examined the control panel more closely. The switches were labeled in standard military nomenclature, but several had been relabeled with tape and marker. One switch, originally marked Master Arm, now read Pressure Seal. Another, labeled Fuel Transfer, had been changed to Atmosphere Cycler. They gutted the weapons systems, I said. Repurposed them for life support. How? Ashcroft asked from outside. I do not know, but someone did it. I moved my light along the console. Beneath the primary instrument cluster, I found a small access panel. It had been opened recently. The screws were clean, free of corrosion. I removed the panel. Behind it, mounted in the empty space where avionics should have been, was a device I did not recognize. It was roughly the size of a car battery, cylindrical, with cooling fins and a small digital display. The display was active. Numbers flickered across it. Depth, pressure, atmospheric composition. And in the lower corner, a battery indicator showing 73% charge. There is a device here, I reported. Custom built. It is monitoring environmental conditions and appears to be powered. After 9 months? Whitmore's voice crackled through the comm. The battery indicator shows 73% remaining. That is impossible. No battery has that kind of capacity. I looked at the device more closely. The casing was unmarked. No manufacturer labels. No serial numbers. Just smooth metal and the glowing display. Sir, I think this is not a standard battery. What is it? I do not know. Hale had positioned himself near the wing root, his camera aimed at the external fuel tanks. Lieutenant, you should see this. I extracted myself from the cockpit and joined him. He was pointing at one of the underwing tanks. This is not a fuel tank, he said. I examined it. The shape was right, but the mounting points were wrong. And there was a seam running along the bottom that should not have been there. Cut it open, I said. Hale used a small hydraulic cutter to breach the tank's outer shell. Metal peeled back, revealing an interior that was not designed to hold fuel. It was a pressure chamber, reinforced, sealed, and empty. They converted the external tanks, I said, made them into habitable modules. For what purpose? Whitmore asked. I thought about the logbook entry. Crew disembarking as planned. For the crew, I said. They sealed themselves inside these tanks. Ashcroft moved to the opposite wing. There is another one here. We breached the second tank. Same configuration. Same reinforcement. Also empty. For crew members. For tanks. But they are all empty now, Hale said. Yes. Where did they go? I looked down at the seabed. The sediment was undisturbed except for our own disturbance from the first dive. No footprints. No tracks. No evidence that anyone had exited the tanks and walked away. Surface control, I said slowly. The external tanks have been converted into individual pressure chambers. They are empty now, but they were designed to hold the crew during descent. And after descent? Whitmore asked. Unknown. There is no evidence of egress. I moved back to the fuselage, following the line of the hull toward the tail section. Ashcroft followed me, his light sweeping the structure. Near the tail, I found another modification. The emergency escape hatch, normally used for bailout scenarios, had been reinforced and fitted with a pressure seal identical to the one on the canopy. I opened it. Beyond the hatch was a vertical shaft, descending into the seabed itself. The walls were smooth, metallic, clearly artificial. And at the bottom, perhaps 10 meters down, I saw light. Not reflected light. Not my light. A different light. Well, steady. There is a shaft, I said, descending below the aircraft into the seabed. That is not possible, Garvin said. The sonar showed solid rock beneath that location. I am looking at a shaft. Whitmore's voice was tight. Describe it. Metallic construction. Approximately 1 meter in diameter. Descends at least 10 meters. There is a light source at the bottom. What kind of light? Unknown. Not natural. Not from our equipment. Silence on the comm. Then Vickers, do not proceed into that shaft. Understood. But I did not move away. I stared down into it, watching the pale light pulse gently, rhythmically, like breathing. Ashcroft was beside me now. What is down there? I do not know. Should we find out? I looked at him. His expression was neutral, but his eyes held something else. Curiosity. Or maybe compulsion. No, I said. We surface. Now. We ascended at 1,401 hours. The decompression stops felt interminable. I kept thinking about the shaft, the light, the empty pressure chambers. When we reached the surface, Whitmore was waiting on the dive platform. Debriefing. Immediately. We were taken to a sealed compartment below deck. Whitmore, Vickers, and the second intelligence officer, a woman named Cass, were already there. Sit, Whitmore said. We sat. He placed a folder on the table and opened it. Inside were photographs. Old photographs. Black and white images of military installations, personnel, equipment I did not recognize. What you found today, Whitmore began, is consistent with a project that officially does not exist. In 1987, Naval Intelligence initiated a research program designated Deep Watch. The objective was to explore the feasibility of establishing permanent underwater observation posts on the continental shelf. He slid one of the photographs toward me. It showed a cylindrical structure being lowered from a ship. These installations were designed to be covert, self-sustaining, and strategically positioned to monitor submarine activity during the Cold War. Why am I only hearing about this now? I asked. Because the project was terminated in 1991 after 3 installations were successfully deployed and 2 were lost during placement. Lost how? Contact was lost. No telemetry. No recovery possible. Vickers leaned forward. The program was classified above top secret. When it was shut down, all records were sealed. The installations that were successfully deployed were left in place, deemed too expensive and too risky to recover. I looked at the photograph, then back at Whitmore. You think the shaft we found leads to one of these installations? I think Lieutenant Commander Merrick was ordered to deliver a crew to that installation 9 months ago. I think he modified his aircraft to function as a submersible delivery vehicle. And I think he succeeded. Then where is the crew now? Whitmore closed the folder. That is what you are going to find out. Ashcroft spoke for the first time since the debriefing began. You want us to go down that shaft? Yes. That is not a diving operation. That is a penetration into an unknown structure with unknown conditions. Correct. We are not trained for that. You are the most qualified personnel available. I looked at Whitmore. Why not send a specialist team? Because this operation does not officially exist. If I request specialist resources, questions will be asked. Reports will be filed. People will want to know why we are investigating a terminated Cold War program. And you do not want that. No. Why not? Whitmore met my gaze. Because if Deep Watch is still operational, it means someone has been running it without authorization for 30 years. And if someone is running it, I need to know who and why before this becomes a political nightmare. Cass spoke up. Lieutenant Boone, we understand this is beyond standard operational parameters. You can decline. No repercussions. I looked at Ashcroft. He was staring at the table, jaw tight. If we decline, I said, what happens? We seal the site and walk away, Whitmore said. And the crew? They are already declared deceased. I thought about the empty pressure chambers, the light at the bottom of the shaft, the logbook entry, procedure complete. We go, I said. Ashcroft looked up. You are sure? No. But we go anyway. Whitmore nodded. You leave at 0600 tomorrow. You will have 12 hours to penetrate the installation, locate the crew or evidence of their fate, and return. If you are not back in 12 hours, we extract without you. Understood. The briefing ended. As we left, Cass pulled me aside. Lieutenant, she said quietly, there is something you should know. What? The last communication from Deep Watch Installation 3, the one your shaft likely connects to, was received in 1989. It was a single-word transmission. What word? She hesitated. Help. We spent the rest of the day preparing equipment. The penetration into the shaft required specialized gear, additional lighting, redundant air supplies, emergency ascent systems, and communication relays in case we lost contact with the surface. Ashcroft worked in silence, checking and rechecking every piece of equipment with a methodical attention that had kept him alive through 3 decades of diving. I had seen him like this before on operations where the margin for error was non-existent. You do not have to come, I said. He did not look up. Yes, I do. Why? He finished coiling his safety line and set it aside. Because 32 years ago, I was part of the team that installed Deep Watch 3. I stared at him. You never mentioned that. It was classified. Still is. He met my eyes. I was younger then. We all were. They told us we were building the future of naval intelligence. Permanent eyes on the ocean floor. We believed them. What happened? We placed the installation at 70 meters, exactly where that shaft is now. Spent 2 weeks setting it up. Got it operational. Left a crew of 4 inside to run it. 3 months later, they stopped responding to check-ins. Command decided it was a communication failure. Ordered us to move on to the next site. You never went back? We were not authorized to. The program was already losing funding. By the time someone decided to investigate, Deep Watch had been shut down entirely. And the crew? Ashcroft looked away. We assumed they evacuated. Emergency protocols would have sent them to the surface if life support failed. But we never found them. Never found bodies. Never found emergency beacons. They just disappeared. Until now. Maybe. I let the silence settle between us. The light at the bottom of that shaft, Ashcroft said quietly. That was not there when we installed the facility. It was dark. Still. Dead. You think it is operational again? I think something turned it back on. We entered the water at 0603 hours. The morning was gray, the sea calm. Ashcroft and I descended together, our lights cutting through the darkness as we dropped past 30 meters, 40-60. The wreck appeared below us, exactly as we had left it. The canopy still open. The shaft still visible beneath the tail section. We reached the opening at 0621. Surface control, this is Boone. We are at the shaft entrance. Beginning descent. Whitmore's voice came through. Proceed with caution. Maintain constant communication. Understood. I looked at Ashcroft. He nodded. We entered the shaft. The walls were smooth, metallic, precisely machined. Every meter we passed a reinforcing ring welded into the structure. The construction was deliberate, professional, military grade. At 5 meters down, we deployed the first communication relay. A small transponder that would boost our signal back to the surface. At 10 meters, we reached the bottom. The shaft opened into a horizontal corridor. The light I had seen from above came from fixtures embedded in the ceiling, pale, steady LED panels that had no business functioning after 30 years underwater. But they were functioning. Surface control, we have entered a horizontal corridor. Lighting is operational. Atmosphere appears to be air, not water. Pause. Then Whitmore, confirm that last statement. I extended my hand into the corridor. My glove broke the surface tension and entered open air. I pulled it back. Dry. Confirmed. The corridor is dry. There is an intact air pocket. Pressure reading? I checked my dive computer. 1.2 atmospheres. Slightly elevated but breathable. Do not remove your rebreather. Negative. Remaining on closed circuit. Ashcroft pulled himself into the corridor beside me. We stood in an impossible space, a dry, lit tunnel 73 meters below the ocean surface. The corridor extended in both directions. To the left, it ended after 20 meters at a sealed hatch. To the right, it continued beyond the range of our lights. Moving toward the hatch, I reported. We approached it slowly. The hatch was standard naval design, circular with a wheel lock mechanism. Stenciled on the surface in faded yellow paint were the words, Deep Watch 3 main access. I gripped the wheel and turned. It moved smoothly, well-maintained, recently used. The hatch swung open. Beyond it was a chamber approximately 10 meters in diameter. The walls were lined with equipment racks, computer consoles, and storage lockers. Everything was organized, functional, operational. And in the center of the room, sitting at a console with his back to us, was a man. He did not turn around. Surface control, I said carefully. We have located a crew member. He is alive. Appears to be working at a console. Silence on the comm. Then Whitmore, his voice tight. Identify him. I moved closer. The man was wearing a flight suit. The name tape on his back read, Merrick. It is Lieutenant Commander Merrick. Confirm visual identification. Confirmed. I am looking at his name tape. I reached out and touched his shoulder. Commander Merrick? He did not respond. I moved around to face him. Merrick was staring at the console screen. His eyes were open, focused, but he did not acknowledge my presence. His hands rested on the keyboard, fingers positioned as if typing, but motionless. Commander Merrick, I said again louder. Nothing. I looked at the console screen. It displayed a continuous scroll of data, coordinates, depth readings, atmospheric composition, power levels. In the upper corner, a timer counted upward. It read, 267 days, 14 hours, 22 minutes. 9 months. He has been sitting here for 9 months, I said. Ashcroft moved to the other consoles. The whole facility is running. Life support, power, environmental controls. Everything is nominal. Where are the other crew members? We searched the main chamber. 3 doors led to adjacent compartments. I opened the first. It was a sleeping quarters. 4 bunks, all made with military precision. On each bunk, a folded flight suit. Name tapes visible, Hail Voss Kim. Wait. I looked at the name tapes again. Hail Voss Kim. But the crew of Osprey 27 had been Merrick, plus 3 electronic warfare officers whose names I had seen in the briefing documents. Those names had been different. Surface Control, the name tapes do not match the crew roster for Osprey 27. Whitmore's response was immediate. Read the names. Hale, Voss, Kim. A long pause. Those are the names of the original Deepwatch 3 crew. The ones who disappeared in 1989. I felt cold. Lieutenant Boone, Whitmore continued, you need to understand something. The crew that Merrick brought down 9 months ago, their names were Taylor, Rodriguez, and Sung. They are not the people whose flight suits you are looking at. I stared at the bunks. Then where are Taylor, Rodriguez, and Sung? I do not know. Ashcroft opened the second door. Lieutenant, you need to see this. I joined him. The compartment was smaller, lined with storage racks. But it was what was on the racks that stopped me. Flight suits. Dozens of them. All folded. All with name tapes. I read them aloud. Morrison. Chin. Valdez. Brooks. Peterson. Those are crew members from Deepwatch 1 and 2, Ashcroft said quietly. I recognized the names. They were lost during installation in 1988 and 1990. I moved along the racks. More names. More flight suits. Some were older, the fabric faded. Others were newer. At the end of the rack, I found 3 suits that looked recent. The name tapes read, Taylor Rodriguez Sung. Surface Control, we have located the flight suits of Merrick's crew. They are stored with the suits of previous Deepwatch personnel, but not the crew members themselves. Negative. Just the suits. I turned back to the main chamber. Merrick was still sitting at the console, motionless, staring at the screen. Commander Merrick, I said, standing directly in front of him. Where is your crew? He did not respond, but his eyes moved, just slightly. They shifted from the screen to me, and he spoke. His voice was dry, barely a whisper. They are working. Working where? Below. Below where? He pointed down. I looked at the floor. It was solid metal plating. But in the corner of the chamber, partially hidden behind a storage rack, I saw another hatch. I moved the rack aside. The hatch was smaller than the main access, perhaps half a meter in diameter, and it was warm to the touch. There is a secondary hatch, I reported. It is radiating heat. Do not open it, Whitmore said immediately. I looked at Ashcroft. He was staring at the hatch. Lieutenant, Whitmore's voice was sharp. Do not open that hatch. That is an order. I put my hand on the wheel. Boone. I turned it. The hatch unsealed with a hiss of equalized pressure. Heat poured out, thick and humid, and with it a sound. Machinery. Rhythmic, mechanical like pistons cycling. and beneath it, breathing. I looked down into the opening. Another shaft descending into darkness. But this one was different. The walls were not metallic. They were organic, pulsing, moving. And from the bottom, perhaps 20 meters down, I heard voices, singing. Not words, not melody. Just voices, harmonizing, rising and falling in a pattern that should not have been possible. Surface control, I said slowly, there is something below the installation. Define something. I do not know, but it is alive. Merrick spoke again, his voice clearer now. They wanted company. They have been alone for so long. We gave them company. I turned to him. Who wanted company? The first crew. Hale, boss, Kim. They founded in 1989. They tried to leave, but it asked them to stay. So they stayed. What is it? It lives in the crust, below the rock. It has always been there. We just never knew how to listen. Ashcroft had moved to the edge of the hatch, looking down. Lieutenant, I am reading increased seismic activity. The installation is vibrating. The singing grew louder. Merrick stood up. For the first time since we had entered, he moved. He walked to the hatch and looked down into it. It knows you are here, he said. It wants to meet you. We are leaving, I said. You cannot leave. The procedure is not complete. What procedure? The one Hale started. The one Voss continued. The one I completed. He looked at me. His eyes were clear, focused, but wrong. You are the next delivery. The vibration increased. The walls of the installation began to hum. Surface control, we are extracting now. Negative boon. The shaft is collapsing. Sonar shows movement in the rock above you. I looked at Ashcroft. Move. We ran toward the main hatch. Behind us, Merrick's voice called out, calm and patient. You cannot leave. None of us did. You will understand soon. We reached the corridor. The shaft leading back to the surface was still there, but the walls were contracting, the reinforcing rings buckling inward. Go, I shouted. Ashcroft entered first. I followed. We ascended as fast as safe decompression allowed, watching the walls close behind us like a throat swallowing. At 15 meters, the shaft sealed completely below us. We broke the surface at 0847 hours. The thresher was already moving, engines at full power pulling away from the site. They hauled us aboard while the ship was still accelerating. Whitmore was on deck. The entire structure is collapsing. Sonar shows the seabed is subsiding. I looked back. The water where the wreck had been was churning, frothing, as if something beneath was pulling everything down. And then, just for a moment, I saw it. Something rising from the deep. Not breaking the surface, but visible beneath the water. Large, organic, moving with deliberate intelligence. It watched us. Then it descended, taking the wreck, the installation, and everything inside back down into the crust. The water calmed. Silence. What was that? Ashcroft whispered. I do not know, I said. But I did know. We all knew. There are things in the deep that predate us. Things that exist in spaces we do not understand. Things that are alone until we find them. And once we do, they do not let go. The site was sealed the following day. Concrete barriers. Warning buoys. Exclusion zone. The official report listed the incident as a failed recovery operation. Equipment malfunction. No actionable findings. Merrick was listed as deceased. Again, I was reassigned to training operations. Ashcroft retired. We do not talk about what we saw, but sometimes late at night I hear singing. Not words, not melody, just voices harmonizing, calling from somewhere deep below. And I know that one day I will answer, because the procedure is not complete. It never is.